Some people spend a lifetime earning a seat at the table, others inherit one. The difference isn't measured by money, success, or the size of a house. It's measured by the quiet choices people make when nobody is watching. The rides to school before dawn, the overtime shifts that nobody thanks you for, the birthdays where you buy your child the gift they wanted, knowing yours will have to wait another year. That's where a family ledger is written, not on paper. In memory, I believe that if you filled enough pages with love, sacrifice would eventually come back around, not as a reward, just as recognition. I was wrong, because there comes a day when someone you've spent your entire life standing behind decides you're standing in the way. And somehow, the deepest wounds are delivered in the calmest voices. The moment that changed everything happened on Saturday, 18 May, at exactly 4:17 p.m., inside the Grand Willow Ballroom outside Nashville, Tennessee. The room smelled of fresh roses and polished oak. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across white linen tables. A string quartet drifted through the room, while waiters adjusted champagne glasses that cost more than the boots I wore to work for half my life. It should have been the happiest day of my son's life. Instead, it became the day I finally understood mine. Welcome to modern American Dad. Get comfortable, this one's going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. If stories about family, dignity, and justice speak to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Now, let me tell you what really happened. My name is Michael Carter. I'm 62 years old. For 38 years, I built custom cabinets in a workshop my father left me on the edge of Franklin, Tennessee. Wood tells the truth. Oak doesn't pretend to be walnut. Cherry doesn't envy maple. Every board carries its scars honestly. Maybe that's why I always preferred working with timber over people. When you sand away rough edges on wood, it becomes stronger. Life doesn't always work that way. These days, I spend most mornings drinking black coffee on my porch while feeding the bluebirds that visit the old maple tree beside the driveway. Around 8, I walk into my workshop even though I officially retired 18 months ago. Some habits aren't jobs, they're home. Looking back, I can admit something I couldn't see for years. I believed avoiding confrontation made me a good father. In reality, it simply taught my son there would never be consequences. My late wife, Sarah, tried to tell me that. She had a way of saying difficult things without raising her voice. Michael, she'd whisper while drying dinner plates, peace isn't the absence of arguments. Peace is knowing everyone respects the same boundaries. I'd smile, kiss her forehead, promise I'd think about it. I rarely did. After Sarah passed away from pancreatic cancer 6 years earlier, silence settled into the house like dust. Ethan visited less often. Life, he said, work, meetings, travel. I believed him because I wanted to. Parents become experts at believing the version of their children that hurts the least. The first time I met Olivia Brooks, I understood why Ethan had fallen in love with her. She arrived carrying homemade peach pie because she remembered Ethan mentioning it was Sarah's favorite dessert. Nobody had asked her to. She simply thought it would mean something. It did. She stayed after dinner helping wash dishes despite my protests. When she noticed an old framed photograph sitting above the fireplace, she picked it up carefully. "Is this your wife?" I nodded. "Sarah," Olivia smiled softly. "She has kind eyes." That sentence stayed with me, not because it was extraordinary, because it was sincere. You learn a lot about people by the way they speak about someone they've never met. Ethan interrupted before we could say much more. "Come on, Liv, Dad keeps every old picture in the house." He laughed. I laughed too. Only later did I realize I'd become the joke. 3 months before the wedding, Ethan called on a Tuesday afternoon. "Hey, Dad," his voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Got a minute? For you, always." He hesitated. "The venue upgraded us." "That's wonderful." "Yeah. Except it costs another $18,000. I heard him clear his throat. I was wondering if he never finished. He didn't have to. Parents hear unfinished sentences better than complete ones. "I'll take care of it, you sure?" I said I would. His relief arrived instantly. "Thanks, Dad. I knew I could count on you." After hanging up, I opened the small safe in my bedroom closet. Inside sat an envelope labeled retirement trip. Sarah and I had planned to drive across America after retirement. Yellowstone, Montana, Maine in autumn. She kept brochures folded neatly inside that envelope. She never lived long enough to use them. I counted the savings, then drove to the bank the following morning. The teller recognized me. "Big withdrawal today, Mr. Carter. My son's getting married." She smiled. "Congratulations," I smiled back. Sometimes two people can tell the truth while meaning completely different things. A week later, I met Ethan at the venue to sign the final payment documents. The ballroom buzzed with decorators measuring floral displays. Staff rolled silver cutlery across polished tables. A coordinator introduced herself. "Mr. Carter." "Yes, I'm Jennifer Collins, the wedding planner." She handed me a folder. I just need your signature here since you're covering the remaining balance. Before I reached for the pen, Ethan gently touched Jennifer's arm. Actually, his smile looked effortless. My future in-laws are arriving soon, Jennifer nodded politely, so I'd appreciate it if we kept the payment part quiet. She frowned slightly. I'm sorry, I just don't want it becoming a whole conversation. I looked at Ethan. What conversation? He shifted uncomfortably. They think Olivia and I are handling everything ourselves. The words landed lightly, almost politely, which somehow made them heavier. So, you'd rather they didn't know? Dad, it's not like that. What is it like? He rubbed the back of his neck. They're different how? They're successful. I waited. He finally finished the sentence. I don't want them thinking we're still. Blue collar, there it was, not shouted, not cruel, simply spoken. As though the life I'd spent building had become something that needed hiding. Jennifer quietly excused herself. Neither of us noticed. I stared at the ballroom floor while workers carried expensive flower arrangements behind us. Finally I said, you know where those hands came from, Ethan? He looked confused. My hands. I held them out, scarred knuckles. Permanent lines worn into the skin. They built every opportunity you've ever had. I know that, do you? He sighed. Please don't make this into something bigger than it is. I nodded once. I won't, and I meant it. Not because it didn't hurt, because I hadn't yet realized how much worse it was about to become. The weeks before a wedding have a strange way of disguising problems. Everyone calls them stress. Forgotten phone calls become stress. Cold conversations become stress. People who suddenly stop looking you in the eye are simply stressed. I accepted that explanation longer than I should have, mostly because I wanted to. Parents become very good at translating disappointment into temporary inconvenience. It hurts less that way, at least for a while. 3 weeks before the wedding, Ethan asked if I could meet him for lunch. We chose a small barbecue place halfway between my workshop and his office, the same restaurant we'd visited after his high school baseball games. Nothing had changed. The red vinyl booths were still cracked. The ceiling fans still squeaked every few seconds. The waitress still called everyone honey. Only Ethan felt different. He arrived 15 minutes late wearing an expensive navy suit I'd never seen before. His watch probably cost more than my first pickup truck. He hugged me quickly, barely long enough to call it one. Sorry, he said while checking his phone. Conference call ran over. No problem, he ordered without looking at the menu. Grilled chicken, sparkling water, no fries. That made me smile. What? I remember when you thought vegetables were punishment. He laughed politely, not naturally politely. You've got to grow up sometime. The waitress left. Silence settled between us. Finally, Ethan leaned forward. So, Richard and Linda want to host a dinner next Friday. The Brooks family. Yeah, that sounds nice. It is. He hesitated. Then came the real reason I'd been invited. They'd like to meet. Everyone, I'll be there. He looked down. Actually, that word again, actually, it had become the doorway to every uncomfortable conversation we had anymore. I think it might be better if you skipped this one. I stared at him. I'm sorry, they're inviting business partners, family, friends, people from the country club. I understand. You do. I understand what those words mean. He sighed heavily. Dad, no. Explain it. It's complicated. It usually isn't. He rubbed his temples. They've built a certain image. And I don't want awkward questions. What questions? He looked embarrassed. They keep asking what you do. I made cabinets. I know. So tell them. It isn't that simple. I smiled sadly. It really is. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. They think you invested in commercial properties after retiring. I blinked. What? I may have. Stretched a few details. You lied. I was protecting everyone. No. I shook my head slowly. You were protecting yourself. He didn't answer. The food arrived. Neither of us touched it. After nearly a minute, I reached across the table and folded my napkin. You know, your mother used to say something. He looked up. A lie always charges interest. What does that mean? It means eventually someone has to pay for it. I stood. I hope, for your sake, it isn't Olivia. That evening, Frank Wilson knocked on my workshop door. He didn't bother with greetings. He simply held up 2 paper cups of coffee. The diner was out of decent lids again. I laughed. Frank had been my neighbor for 28 years. We'd buried our wives within 11 months of each other. Some friendships don't need maintenance. They survive on shared silence. He noticed the untouched cabinet sitting on my workbench. You've been sanding the same drawer for 20 minutes. I know. Wanna tell me why? I told him everything. Not dramatically, just the facts. When I finished, Frank nodded once, then said 4 words. That's not on you. I looked away. I keep wondering where I went wrong. Frank took a slow sip of coffee. You taught him to work hard. I tried. You taught him honesty. I thought I did. You taught him generosity. I know. He set his cup down. What he does with those lessons. He shrugged gently. That's what people do. Simple. No speeches, no false comfort, just truth. Sometimes that's enough. A few days later, Olivia called me. Her voice sounded nervous. Michael, hello, Olivia. I hope I'm not bothering you. Never, she hesitated. I wanted to ask something. Go ahead. Richard mentioned you couldn't make dinner next Friday. I smiled faintly. So I've heard. I was hoping you'd come. There was genuine disappointment in her voice. I enjoy talking with you. Before I could answer, another voice echoed faintly through her phone. Ethan, a door closed. She lowered her voice. Did something happen? I looked out across my porch. The evening sun had turned the maple leaves golden. A cardinal landed on the bird feeder Sarah had painted years ago. No, are you sure? I think this is one of those situations where everyone believes they're protecting someone else. I don't understand. I hope you never have to. She was quiet. Then she said something that stayed with me. My father always says families shouldn't have secrets before weddings. I almost laughed, if only she knew. Friday arrived warm and cloudless. I didn't attend the Brooks family dinner. Instead, I stayed in my workshop restoring an oak rocking chair. Around 7:30, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. You home? Yes, I'm stopping by. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway. He looked exhausted. His tie hung loose. What happened? He walked inside without answering. Finally, he sat down. They asked about you. I'm sure they did. I covered it. How? I said you preferred privacy. I nodded. Anything else? He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, I said you'd been traveling. I looked at him for several seconds. You know what disappoints me? He braced himself. It isn't the lie. What then? How easy it was. The following Monday, I received an unexpected letter, not from Ethan, from Rebecca Morgan, an estate attorney. At first, I assumed it was junk mail. Instead, it concerned an old trust Sarah and I had created years earlier, one I'd almost forgotten. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at 10 o'clock a.m. Rebecca Morgan's office overlooked the Cumberland River. Everything inside reflected quiet precision. Framed legal certificates, neatly organized files, fresh lilies on the reception desk. She greeted me warmly. Mr. Carter, please, I smiled. Michael, she led me into her office. I reviewed your family's estate documents after a routine compliance audit. I didn't realize there was one. There usually isn't, she smiled politely. But your late wife included a handwritten letter with the trust. She opened a leather folder. I believe she'd intended you to receive this if certain amendments were never made. She carefully slid a sealed envelope across the desk. Sarah's handwriting, instantly recognizable. My hands trembled before I'd even opened it. Rebecca looked away respectfully. I'll give you a moment. The room became impossibly quiet. The envelope smelled faintly of old paper and lavender. Sarah had always kept lavender sachets in our filing cabinet. I unfolded the letter. The first line stole every breath from my lungs. My dearest Michael, if you're reading this, it means you're still putting everyone else's happiness ahead of your own. I closed my eyes. It sounded exactly like her. Rebecca waited silently. When I finished reading several minutes later, she asked softly, "Are you all right?" I nodded. I think my wife just reminded me who I used to be. Rebecca folded her hands. There's one more thing. She opened another file. The trust gives you complete discretion over the assets intended for Ethan. I frowned. I thought everything transferred automatically. It doesn't, not until you authorize it. I looked up. What exactly are you saying? She met my eyes calmly. I'm saying the next decision belongs entirely to you. Outside, the river moved steadily beneath the morning sun. For the first time in months, I realized I wasn't powerless. Not because I wanted revenge, because I finally had a choice. If this story has resonated with you so far, take a second to like the video. Stories like this remind us that respect isn't something money can buy, and if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I drove home with Sarah's letter resting on the passenger seat. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of memories I hadn't allowed myself to revisit. Sarah had always believed that kindness without self-respect eventually turned into permission. I'd nodded every time she said it. I simply hadn't understood it, not until now. When I reached the house, I placed the letter beside the framed photograph on the mantel. Sarah was smiling in the picture, standing in front of the little cabin we'd rented for our 25th anniversary. Her hair was blowing across her face. She never brushed it away before someone took the photo. She said life looked better when it wasn't perfectly arranged. I smiled despite myself. You were right again, I whispered. I just wish it hadn't taken me so long. The wedding was 9 days away. For the first time since Ethan announced his engagement, I stopped asking myself how to fix everything. Instead, I asked a different question. What was actually mine to fix? There was a difference. Parents spend decades believing every problem belongs to them. Eventually, you realize some lessons only life can teach. The next morning, I called Rebecca Morgan. I'd like to make a few changes. She didn't ask why. Of course, Mr. Carter. I don't want to punish anyone. I understand. I just want my decisions to reflect reality. That's exactly what estate planning is meant to do. We scheduled another meeting for Friday. When I arrived, she already had the paperwork waiting. I've drafted 2 versions, she explained. The first leaves everything exactly as it is. and the second, it establishes a charitable woodworking scholarship in Sarah Carter's name and postpones Ethan's inheritance until several conditions are met. I looked up. What conditions? Rebecca slid the papers towards me. He must request a meeting with you voluntarily. He must acknowledge in writing that the relationship matters more than the inheritance, and he must complete 1 year as an active mentor in the scholarship program. I read the page twice. This wasn't your idea. No, she smiled gently. It was inspired by your wife's handwritten notes attached to the original trust. I laughed quietly. That sounds exactly like Sarah. Rebecca folded her hands. Money can solve financial problems, she paused, but sometimes structure creates opportunities that money never could. I signed, not with anger, with peace. 3 days before the wedding, Frank stopped by carrying a cardboard box. I found these while cleaning my attic. Inside were dozens of photographs, little league games, fishing trips, school science fairs, camping weekends, Sarah laughing while Ethan sat on her shoulders pretending to steer an invisible horse. Frank picked up one photograph. You remember this? I smiled immediately. Ethan was 10. He cried because he struck out, and then insisted baseball was unfair. Frank laughed. You sat with him in the parking lot for 45 minutes. He finally said. We both finished the sentence together. Maybe I'll hit it next time. The room fell quiet. Frank looked at me. That boy loved you. I know. So what happened? I looked at the photograph. He started believing success meant leaving every part of his old life behind. Frank nodded slowly. Some people confuse roots with anchors. The rehearsal dinner arrived on a warm Friday evening. I wasn't invited. I hadn't expected to be. Around 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Olivia. Michael, hello. Can I ask you something honestly? Always. Her voice was tense. Something feels off. I stayed quiet. Ethan gets nervous every time someone mentions you. I imagine he does. My parents think you're traveling. I closed my eyes. I see, but that's impossible. Why? Because your truck is parked outside your house. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question Ethan had spent months avoiding. Why would he lie about something so small? I answered carefully. Sometimes people tell one small lie because they think it opens a bigger door. And does it? No, it usually closes one. She thanked me softly before ending the call. Saturday arrived bright and warm, wedding day. I dressed more slowly than usual. Navy suit, white shirt, Sarah's favorite silver tie clip, the one she'd given me on our 20th anniversary. As I adjusted it in the mirror, I caught myself wondering what she would have said. Probably something simple. Stand tall. She always believed dignity was visible long before anyone spoke. The Grand Willow Ballroom looked even more beautiful than it had weeks earlier. Fresh white roses lined the entrance. A pianist played quietly near the reception hall. Guests laughed over glasses of sparkling cider and champagne. Everyone looked as though they belonged exactly where they were, except me. The usher checked my invitation, then hesitated. I'm sorry, sir. Yes, your table assignment changed. He looked embarrassed. I've been asked to seat you here. He pointed towards a small table tucked against the far wall, not with family, not with old friends, not even with distant relatives. Alone. Far enough away that no one would naturally stop to talk. I thanked him anyway. None of this was his fault. I took my seat. From where I sat, I could see the head table clearly. Ethan looked relaxed, confident. Olivia looked radiant. Richard Brooks moved through the room greeting guests with genuine warmth. Linda smiled at nearly everyone she passed. For a brief moment I considered leaving, not dramatically, quietly, no scene, no confrontation, just disappearing. Then I remembered something Sarah once told me after Ethan's high school graduation. Never leave a room because someone hopes you will, so I stayed. A waiter placed a glass of water in front of me. The ice clinked softly against the glass. Across the room, conversations flowed without interruption. No one noticed the man sitting alone, at least, not at first. The first person to notice wasn't Ethan. It wasn't one of my relatives. It wasn't even someone who knew my name. It was Olivia. She had just finished greeting a table of elderly guests when her eyes wandered across the ballroom. For a second she looked confused, then concerned. She leaned toward Ethan. He barely glanced in my direction before saying something that made her hesitate. She didn't move. Instead, she looked back at me, then back at him. Whatever answer he'd given her, it hadn't satisfied her. Dinner began promptly at 6:42 p.m., the ballroom filled with the soft clink of silverware and quiet conversation. The wedding planner, Jennifer Collins, stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this wonderful celebration. Applause followed. A few short speeches came first. Richard Brooks welcomed both families. He spoke warmly about marriage, commitment, and honesty. That last word lingered in the air longer than he realized. Honesty. It has a way of finding the people who need to hear it most. Then Jennifer announced, before dessert, we'd like to invite the bride and groom to thank everyone who helped make today possible. Olivia smiled. She took the microphone first. Her speech was simple, heartfelt. She thanked her parents, her bridesmaids, her teachers, even the florist. Then she looked at Ethan. Your turn. He accepted the microphone confidently. I've been blessed by so many people. He thanked his colleagues, his best man, Richard, Linda, friends from university, business mentors, people I'd never heard of. Then he stopped. His speech was over. Not one word about me. I felt the disappointment, but I wasn't surprised. Just as Jennifer prepared to continue the program, Olivia gently touched Ethan's arm. You forgot your dad. The microphone was still live. The room became quieter. Ethan forced a smile. No, I didn't, she frowned. Then invite him. His jaw tightened. It's complicated. She looked across the ballroom until she found me sitting alone. Then she asked the question that would change everything. Why is your father sitting by himself? Every conversation in the room seemed to pause. Dozens of heads slowly turned, including mine. Ethan laughed awkwardly. Oh, he's more comfortable over there. I lowered my eyes. That lie might have worked. If he had stopped there instead, he added one sentence too many. We're not very close. The words echoed through the ballroom, not loud, not dramatic, simply clear, for the first time all evening. Richard Brooks looked genuinely confused. He turned toward his daughter. You told me Michael paid for the rehearsal dinner. Olivia blinked. I thought he did. Richard looked at Ethan. I assumed he was helping with the wedding as well. Silence. Jennifer Collins slowly looked down at the clipboard she was holding. I recognized that expression. Someone caught between professionalism and conscience. Richard spoke again. Didn't he? Ethan hesitated before he could answer. Jennifer quietly stepped forward. I'm sorry. Her voice remained calm. But Mr. Carter authorized every final payment. The ballroom froze. She looked embarrassed. I thought everyone already knew. No one spoke. Ethan's face drained of color. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply asked, every payment? Jennifer nodded carefully. Yes, sir. The venue, the catering balance, the music, the additional floral arrangements. She looked toward me. Everything approved through Mr. Carter. Richard slowly turned back toward Ethan. You told us the two of you had paid for this yourselves. No answer. Linda covered her mouth. Olivia looked as though someone had quietly removed the floor beneath her. She stared at Ethan. You lied to me. He finally found his voice. I was trying to avoid awkward conversations. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. You created them. I stood, not because I wanted attention, because sitting any longer felt dishonest. The room remained completely silent as I walked toward them. Every footstep sounded louder than it should have. I stopped a respectful distance away. Ethan, he couldn't meet my eyes. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised even me. I was simply finished carrying what wasn't mine. I don't care who knows I made cabinets. I held out my hands. The scars across my fingers caught the light from the chandeliers. These hands built kitchens. They built libraries. They built children's bedrooms. They also built the life you were given. I looked around the room. I've never been ashamed of honest work. Then I looked back at my son. I only wish you hadn't been. No one moved. No one interrupted. There was nothing else to add. Truth rarely requires decoration. Olivia quietly stepped away from Ethan. She walked toward me instead. I'm so sorry. I shook my head gently. You've done nothing wrong. Her voice trembled. I asked him over and over why you kept avoiding our family. I wasn't avoiding anyone. I know. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I know now. Richard approached next. He extended his hand. I'm Richard Brooks. I smiled faintly. I know. No, he swallowed. I don't believe we've properly met. I accepted his hand. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. Just two fathers standing in uncomfortable truth. I'm sorry, he said. I believed what I was told. So did I. Ethan finally looked up. Dad, I raised my hand slightly, not to silence him, just to ask for a moment. For 31 years, I said quietly, I believed showing up was enough. I came to every baseball game. I helped with every school project. I worked weekends so you could attend college without debt. I emptied the savings your mother and I planned to travel with. I did all of that gladly. I never kept score. I paused. But somewhere along the way, you started believing my value depended on whether other people found me impressive. The ballroom remained completely still. I can't teach you pride. I already tried. Then I reached into my jacket. Not for a check, not for a document, for Sarah's folded letter. I looked at it for a second before returning it to my pocket. Some things belong only to family. I hope one day you understand what your mother meant when she wrote that character always outlives reputation. I turned to leave. No applause, no dramatic music, just silence. Sometimes silence is the loudest consequence. Outside, the evening air felt cool against my face. The scent of fresh-cut grass drifted across the parking lot. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Frank. I figured you might need company. I laughed softly. You always did have good timing. He handed me a small paper cup of coffee. The hotel coffee's terrible. I took it. We stood beside my old pickup truck watching the sun disappear behind the trees. After a minute, Frank smiled. "You okay?" I thought carefully before answering. "For the first time in a long while, I think I am." 3 weeks later, Ethan called. I let it ring, then he left a voicemail. No excuses, no requests, only one sentence. "I'm ready to tell the truth whenever you're ready to hear it." I didn't call back that day or the next. Healing isn't measured by speed. It's measured by sincerity. Months passed before we met, not in a lawyer's office, not in a courtroom, at Sarah's favorite park. He apologized completely, without defending himself, without blaming anyone else, for the first time in years. He sounded like my son again. Trust didn't return that afternoon. Trust never returns all at once. It returns quietly, one honest choice at a time. Rebecca Morgan finalized the scholarship in Sarah's name before Christmas. Every year it would help young men and women learn skilled trades they otherwise couldn't afford. The first plaque inside the workshop read, "Built with honest hands, dedicated to Sarah Carter, who believed character is life's greatest inheritance." I ran my fingers across the engraved letters. Then stepped back. It felt right, not because justice had won, because dignity had remained. People sometimes ask whether I regret paying for the wedding. I always give the same answer. No, love given freely is never wasted. But love without truth eventually becomes invisible. That's the lesson I almost learned too late. If this story meant something to you, thank you for spending your time with me. Be kind to the people who stood beside you before success arrived. They're usually the reason success arrived at all. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. Until next time, take care of the people who never asked for credit. They often deserve it the most.